Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar with Ellis and myself. Excuse me. Obviously, the subject, as you can see on the screen, streamline your cybersecurity without breaking the bank. Hyperefficient Managed XDR Service. For those of you that don't know myself, I'm Nick Browning. I'm the Director of Solution Architecture at Integrity 360. Joined by Ellis at Rapid7, who's head of the threat practice. We're going to jump straight into it, really. We're going to aim to cover off these sort of topics, if you like, during a session: market observations, common problems, solving detection, response overview, weaponization of attack data, bringing together threat and risk, and a Q&A. There is a Q&A chat function available throughout. Becky and Lisa are monitoring that in the background, and we will afford some time at the end for Q&A. If we run out of time to cover all those, we'll get back to you offline with any queries that are outstanding. Okay, so without further ado, let's make a start. I think that within Integrity, we are seeing an awful lot of demand for but we're seeing the challenge commonly of budget coming up. You know, on one hand, you've got to improve your detection and response capability, and you need to do it at speed. On the other hand, you've been squeezed from a budgetary perspective, and we don't believe that you should need to compromise those things. We believe you should be able to get great detection, visibility, whilst also being able to afford within the budgets and the constraints that you're working within. We are seeing an awful lot of success with the rooftops to our non-customers and as well as customers. I think it's incredible. You know, we're having a lot of success in this space, and so a lot of the key reasons for that are on screen shown today. Really, is that Rapid7's, no pun intended, is able to deliver a rapid time to value. We're seeing installations within 2 to 3 weeks around IDR technologies before we go into a period of tuning and analysis. You know, they're the great success stories. You know, don't get me wrong, there are always ones that will take longer. There'll always be problems in certain circumstances, but as a whole, it's one of the more seamless deployments that we experience with Rapid7 and have great feedback from customers. The big one for me personally, someone that works across multiple SIEM technologies, is a predictable asset pricing model. For too long, I think that customers have been victims of a consumption-based model, and we don't believe that is, you know, something that's sustainable in the marketplace. That sort of uncertainty of a spike in consumption, and you've got to pay for that in gigabytes per day, or EPS, or you know, the other models of ingestion. Not to try to tag that to particular vendors there, but you know, predictable asset pricing model is a really important thing for customers, and with that becomes a certainty around ingestion. You don't have to worry about an ingestion spike. You know, that's covered. And equally, backing that up, where you have regulatory requirements to keep data for a certain period of time, there can be another cost on top of that. Which again, we don't feel is necessarily an acceptable model. You need that certainty. You need to be able to forecast your budgets and how that's going to work. And so the standard Rapid7 comes with a 13-month data retention period, which helps to satisfy, you know, predominantly regulatory compliance, as well as any need to go back and follow the bit of string beyond 90 days potentially. We offer so Rapid7 also have a significant amount of use cases, attacker behavior use cases, user behavior use cases, predominantly informed by the tactics, techniques, and procedures in terms of in MITRE. And yes, not all 8,000 get turned on, you'll be pleased to know, from day zero. Ultimately, it's informed by the log sources that we put at that particular platform in the first place. But more importantly, when they are turned on, they actually come with pre-tuned templates, so that we're able to immediately apply an element of tuning at the very first stage, meaning that as analysts start to look at this information artifacts, there's already an element of pre-tuning taking place. other features, the Rapid7 offers is, and I think this is a big deal as well, is that from a consolidation perspective, they offer vulnerability management within the same agent that goes onto said endpoints or said servers. And again, that's a huge win, right? If you can start to do vulnerability management within the same single agent, because everyone gets agent fatigue and gets concerned by that. So it's a big deal as well. But it goes beyond that. They offer network traffic analysis capabilities. So they've got that network detection response type capabilities within there. So looking at network traffic, they've got endpoint detection capabilities. They provide deception, easy for me to say, deception technology capabilities as well as the ability to perform response actions from within that platform. That's a hell of a set of things from an out of the box platform such as Rapid7. But more importantly, I think that it shouldn't be underestimated the power of Rapid7's intelligence. And I think everything they do is ultimately driven by an attacker mindset. And these guys have 11,000 customers and consumers. They have a huge SOC of their own. They are their own SOC, so they're their own users of their own platform. So the evolutions are informed by their own staff and their own customers. But the things that often are overlooked by Rapid7 are actually the common, the things that we may not understand to be related and linked to Rapid7. The open source projects that are moderated by Rapid7, such as your Metasploit, such as your Velociraptor type tools. These all of these tools, Project Sonar, Project Doppler, these are all things that are ultimately gathering intelligence and fueling the flame that lights the engine of Rapid7 essentially. And all these are huge deal. Now jumping ahead a little bit towards the end of the session, we do offer proof of values and we do offer demonstrations around this technology, so you will get to see if you want to reach out to the contacts at the end of this slide. But crucially, we're keen to show any customers that are want to see this in action. And before I just hand over to Ellis, one thing that's constant in anything we do integrity, and that's a good link within Rapid7 as well, is, and I urge customers to do this, I urge you to consider MITRE in decisions that you make when it comes to making investments in detection and response type technologies. These slides will be available to attendees, and you'll be able to look at this in your own time. But what I take away from this particular aspect here is that what you're looking at is the top 15 enterprise tactics, techniques, and procedures, as well as the count of sub-techniques associated. Rapid7 is going to help you, and we will go into this in more detail in further sessions, cover an awful lot of these. Command execution, process creation, file modification, file creation, network traffic content. It's going to give you the coverage to detect these types of tactics, techniques, and procedures by the adversary. Already I'm running over. So I'm going to get told off by marketing. I feel the things coming. So without further ado, Ellis, I'm going to hand over to you. If you want to, I'll stop my screen share and you can grab yours. So I'm not your secretary. And
thanks, mate. That would be great. Thank you, Nick, for the introduction. And thank you guys for having me, for letting me talk about this for the next sort of 20-25 minutes. So apologies for the monologue. But morning, as Nick says, Ellis Fincham. I am the head of our XDR practice here in EMEA. So I look after Insight IDR, our SaaS XDR offering, the managed service that we wrap around that from our Dublin and Belfast offices, and our threat intelligence platform. So looking externally at threats in your environment. And I'm going to lay out, hopefully by the end of the session, what XDR should be delivering, and why as an industry, we've spent probably 10 years trying to buy a way out of a problem, and how I think XDR fits into that mold. If we look last year, we spent as an industry somewhere in the region of 150 billion pounds buying tools. And if we look at all of the meaningful metrics across across the industry, pretty much everything's increasing. Ransomware attacks are increasing. The average cost of an attack, according to our partners Hiscox, last year increased from 12 to 25,000 pounds. and they kind of have predicted that it will continue to double for the next 3 years as well. So, whilst £25,000 doesn't sound like a huge amount of money, when we're talking about the top probably 5% of attacks, they're easily running into seven figures. And when you get to the kind of the far end of the hockey stick, that sort of top 1%, the curve gets incredibly steep. So it's no surprise that businesses are focusing on this. It's no surprise that, things like cyber insurance premiums are rising. Whilst, probably the cover is deteriorating. We saw kind of over the last 3 months, that state-led attacks are being excluded from insurance policies by Lloyd's of London. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was Lloyd's of London and I wanted to get out of jail free card, that would probably be the one I'd play, right? Every kind of tool that exists in the cyber industry at the moment is informed in some way by state-led actors. So, that type of gotcha is becoming more common. And whilst that's interesting and a little bit difficult to deal with, it just means that we're not in the place that our businesses need us to be. If we were, any other part of the business, a sales manager, for example, and we wanted 3 more salespeople, we would have to document that with, how we're getting on with our quarterly forecasts and how we are kind of tracking towards our goals. And if we weren't doing any of those metrics, good luck getting those extra hires, right? And that's kind of how we've been in cybersecurity for the last 10 years, really. Is we keep asking for more money because there are more problems out there to solve, but we're not making a meaningful impact on the metrics that our businesses need us to. So hopefully, over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about a few ways that we've used XDR, internally at Rapid7 and with our customers to help drive business processes, but also to help drive decreases in time to detection and time to response, and helping to use the intelligence we gather from these threats to inform the way that we shape our security processes. Now, for those of you who have been listening, you may have guessed that I'm not from London, and my accent is a bit West Country. If you can work out where this particular piece of street art is, you'll have a very good clue into where I'm from. I don't think I'll make you do it in the Q&A. That seems a bit cruel, but just for those of you interested, this is a piece of street art that is very close to GCHQ in Cheltenham, which is where I kind of have grown up. So I can't claim international man of mystery. I actually, if I'm completely honest with you, can't claim to live in Cheltenham anymore. I've had to move to the burbs because the spies have pushed up all the house prices. But there were more cyber employers than just GCHQ in Gloucestershire, and I started back in 2008 with a company called Message Labs, who were bought by Symantec and turned into Symantec Cloud sort of over the next coming couple of years. I worked at McAfee and Intel Security, mainly in kind of SIEM and data roles, before joining Rapid7 in 2018. And I've been leading their detection response practice first in the UK, and then that's kind of evolved into an EMEA-wide role. And what it means is, okay, I've got overall responsible for the products, but also I get involved in probably 8 to 10 client and partner engagements a week. So I see my share of issues, and hopefully, some of the things that I'm seeing, will ring true to you guys. We're seeing customers who have a low signal to noise ratio. It's quite common that the information coming up into there and the alerts coming out of the investments they've made can be a bit overwhelming. We see customers who have an attack surface that is increasing, that move from on-prem to cloud or from on-prem to application is causing a huge amount of disruption in the way that data is flowing up into organizations' businesses. And it means that, it's difficult for security teams to get a realistic view of what they're actually having to defend. And as security practitioners, we're kind of having to build the train whilst it's moving. And that has a knock-on effect when you're trying to do something at speed. Sometimes the visibility that you want isn't quite there. And a problem that I see quite often is, not only is the visibility not there, but visibility is driven by budget. And just to hark back to Nick's point around kind of data ingestion and events per second, I don't think I ever saw a consistent way of measuring events per second, let alone budgeting for it. So, when organizations are operating in that way, they tend to kind of concentrate their focus or their budget at their crown jewels. And whilst that's useful because those are the things that are most important to your business, you miss a lot of attack indicators, and worryingly, you miss a lot of attack indicators that are a lot earlier in the attack chain. When we talked about MITRE earlier, those reconnaissance and kind of initial access type stage detections are really where we want to pick attackers up, right? We don't want to be dealing with it when they are on our crown jewels. They've already done the legwork for getting data out of your organization, and you are having to react while stuff is on fire. It is soul destroying. It is motivation killing. It means that a lot of our workforce are under a huge amount of stress because the tasks that they're doing, that sort of data mining, looking for the right alerts to go after, is quite repetitive, and the actual tasks that they're the attacks when they unfold are incredibly difficult for them to get their arms around. So they're running around with their trousers on fire, they're overloaded, they're under a lot of stress, and that makes them, that population of security professionals, a bit transient, in that they're doing jobs that they don't want to do. They want to be doing the kind of cool, sexy stuff of threat hunting and informing business strategy, and here they are kind of going through data. And there's enough demand in the market that means they don't have to stay and do rubbish jobs. They can go and find somewhere else that will pay them 10-15% more, that will maybe allow them to use those skills. In reality, they'll probably just take 10 or 15% more and then go and do the same boring, repetitive task somewhere else. But that's by the by. It just means that there's disruption in those businesses, and not only is that bad for teams because you lose knowledge and you lose that kind of understanding of what's going on, it also means that security teams never get to the point where they're justifying their work to the wider business, and they're saying, hey, this is the amount of risk that we have reduced in our business this week, or this is some intelligence that we got from the dark web that has allowed us to get in front of a phishing site so that it's not leaking we're not leaking revenue from our business. Those types of things are the tasks that our businesses want us to do, but we're having to wade through this treacle of kind of data before we even get there. So I want to talk a bit around kind of detections and why there's a better way, and maybe doing it in the way that we have been over the last few years is isn't particularly interesting or efficient even. So when you look at the entire life cycle of a business, it can be really difficult to uncover kind of what is happening. There is cloud infrastructure that is new to us and is kind of a little bit kind of shadow IT, still kind of operating in ways that we wouldn't like, with the best will in the world, we wouldn't like to be as a security professional, but it is what it is. So we want to make sure that if we have got these types of telemetry, cloud data, if there is log data from our existing security tools, let's take those into an XDR solution and make sure that we've got that visibility in there. But also, you should be looking at where attacks happen, right? Your security tools are going to tell you when stuff has happened, when they've either prevented something or they have seen something malicious. Your cloud infrastructure is probably going to give you a similar view. Things like Azure, Event Hub, AWS Guard Duty, CloudTrail. Those are all giving you useful information to make informed choices on kind of what's happening in your environment. But the reality is most attacks will kind of end up executing on the endpoint. And if you've got an agent or some endpoint telemetry, some way of pulling endpoint telemetry up, that's going to give you a really good head start on kind of understanding those attacks. If you have areas of your environment that you aren't able to do that, you aren't able to collect that telemetry, then you maybe think, as Nick was saying earlier, about kind of network telemetry and looking at that kind of net flow data and deep packet inspection to really kind of make sure that there is nothing happening on those assets that you don't have that endpoint visibility on. And that helps us hopefully to build a picture to allow us to make some decisions or query that data in ways that is effective for you. So, okay, we have pulled together our log data from our tools, our endpoint telemetry, our network telemetry, our cloud telemetry as well. We can now interrogate that data in a number of ways to help us focus in on where those attacks are happening, or where those indicators of attack may be happening. And you can use an XDR solution to do that. User behavior analytics, understanding Jane in accounts works 9 till 5, Monday to Friday. She accesses these assets within my business. She logs in from these locations on this IP address. That gives you a little bit of a baseline for when Jane suddenly starts logging in from a different country or onto assets that she's never used before. That's the type of thing that is indicative of an attacker behavior. So we can pick those up and say, hey, that's not normal behavior. Let's go and have a look at that. That's a lot more focused than just, wading through alerts. You should also be able to interrogate that data from an attack chain point of view. We talked about the MITRE attack chain earlier with Nick, and kind of the steps that are in that attack chain, but also the telemetry underneath them, the types of techniques that that attackers are using in order to do some reconnaissance, in order to gain initial access into your environment, to get a foothold of for them to launch an attack. If we use the intelligence that we have as Rapid7 from our research communities, so things like the Metasploit and Velocer projects that Nick mentioned earlier, but also we run an MDR service based on IDR that has about 1,600 clients under management at the moment. We've got about 2 million endpoints. So we see some of those real world attacks unfolding as they're going through, and I'll talk through an example a little bit later on of kind of how that process works and why that's useful for organizations. But just to give you kind of a quick heads up, as they're seeing attacks unfold, they can then pass that to the detection engineering team within Rapid7, and we can get that, we can get a new detection built really quickly. If you've got that context, you can make those decisions on where you focus your efforts. Let's just talk about log data for a minute, right? We build a detection based on log data that says, if I see a white van outside of a bank, I want to know, because people in white vans rob banks. That's not a particularly efficient detection, right? People who drive white vans rob banks. Okay, yeah, I get that piece of intelligence. But also, my plumber drives a white van. The guy who comes to cut my lawns drives a white van. People with white vans turn up outside banks all of the time, and their intention is not to rob that bank. What you need to know is the context around that white van to understand whether it is a threat to your organization. Somebody got out of that white van wearing a mask, carrying a swag bag and a shotgun. Pretty good idea that they're going to come in and rob you. So that's what we're trying to do with XDR, is not just say, hey, there's an alert. Hey, there's an alert. It's associated with this user and this asset. We are seeing these attack chain techniques unfold on that endpoint. Now we need to go and do, that's a investigation that your SOC team should be looking at. And hopefully that means that they're not, they're being fed actionable intelligence rather than having to go and search for it. And if you can do that, if you can take that step out of that searching for actionable intelligence within the data, it means that you free them up to do things that are useful to you as a business. And that could be enabling a project, to ensure that security is baked in from the beginning of that project, whereas most of these projects get to the end and it's an afterthought, or doing something in your environment that is specific to you. If you see a particular attack or a particular type of technique being leveraged at organizations that look like you, maybe they're in the same industry, maybe they've got similar infrastructure, then you can take that hypothesis and you can go and search for it in the data, knowing that all of the kind of normal global threats are being taken care of by your XDR platform. I can go and look for the things that are important to me, or even just to kind of pull back data to query it from an anomaly point of view. Hey, WinWord.exe ran 5,000 times in my environment last week. Once it ran from a recycle bin. I'm going to go and have a look at why that ran from a recycle bin. And that's the type of context that hopefully the XDR solution can give you. When you're doing those types of manual threat hunts, those hypothesis-based threat hunts, or just kind of normal stuff, even if you don't find anything for your teams, there's going to be useful information in there. Because you're pulling the type of data you're pulling back, you'll have things like you'll identify potentially unwanted programs. You'll identify users with non-expiring passwords. You'll identify cloud services that you didn't want to be using. That's where we want security teams to be operating when we're talking about detection, not, my IDS is updated and it's firing off a load of false positives that I now have to go and wade through. That's not interesting or useful work for most people. So, having these tools in place that can help you to gather data, can help you to index it, can help you to kind of give you context, will hopefully give you the best possible kind of platform to launch into response. And as an organizations, we have to understand that response is kind of the most important thing when it comes to recovering from these attacks. If I can take a minute to kind of talk about the types, a story from internally at Rapid7 that we worked through over a few years. This hopefully just illustrates why response is important. Having automated responses that fire off in your environment, even if they have some sort of human oversight, is really important to making sure that the impact of attacks on your environment is as low as possible. So to use us as an example, we roll back sort of 5 years when I just joined Rapid7. We were having an argument about automated responses within our managed service. And we had a legal team that said, you cannot do this. We are going to be sued until we're out of business if you start taking actions in customers' environments and it turns off some sort of revenue generating element of their business. It's going to fall on our shoulders, and we're going to go out of business. So that's fine. It's quite risk averse in terms of its approach, but that was where they were coming from. So what we did was we said, okay, fine. We've got automation in the platform already. We'll send it out to customers in their reports. All they have to do is click on a button, and then that automatic workflow will kick off. So for 6 months, we sent out these findings reports, as we call them, with, hey, you guys have been targeted. Here's some of the remediation actions that we think you should be taking. One of them is, isolate that user from the network because we think their credentials have been stolen or breached or, compromised. It would take a company, after we'd sent them this report, 6 hours to take that action, to click on the button on average. Now, sometimes it was better, sometimes it was worse. You were sending these things out in the middle of the night and they weren't getting it for 6 or 8 hours, and then they were taking the actions. But the reality was it averaged out at about somewhere between 200 and 250 assets in those individual customer environments that would be compromised due to that lack of activity for 6 hours. So we went back to our legal teams and said, look, we've got to do this. If we can get an automated response taken on their behalf within 15 minutes, we can limit the impact of this to 1 or 2 assets within their environment. And, and the cleanup is much, much less in terms of effort for our customers. So, they kind of buckled and said, yeah, we're able to do it. And, we've still got some hoops we have to jump through with customers to make sure that we're not, we're covered. But it just meant that, automatically, regardless of what time of day or night, they were getting a consistent response to attacker activity in their environment. And they weren't coming into, I've got 250 machines I've got to rebuild. That type of task often just completely bombs a whole week, right? If you've got to come in and rebuild 200 machines, you're going to lose a couple of days of your IT team's time. And that means that they're not doing the things that you want them to be doing. But if we can take these automated actions, it helps us as an industry. But we probably shouldn't pat ourselves on the back too hard. Getting these automated actions set up is important, but response doesn't stop just because you've contained the attack. There is a huge amount of work that we need to make sure that we're doing to make sure we weaponize the data that's coming out of those attacks to inform the our risk management side of the business. If we're targeted by a CLOP type organization, we detect it early, so we don't go to that kind of ransomware stage. We manage to kick them out of that kind of initial access. That's really great. Like, okay, we've stopped a ransomware attack. Happy days. But what we should be doing as an organization is going, okay, cool. So the IOCs in that attack linked to the CLOP group. What else is the CLOP group doing that we haven't been targeted around this time that we can help to inform our defenses, our investments, our projects as we go forward? If we can do that, if we can check whether we've got defenses in place or whether we need to make changes to help us avoid those types in the future, we suddenly become a lot less susceptible to an attack. And that means that, as a business, the confidence in you as an organization starts to rise. It also means that if we do, if the worst happens and we do get popped and we do go into a, incident response type situation where there's live data being exfiltrated or, a state-led actor is kind of squatting in your environment, you can arm your responders a lot quicker to get to their kind of so they can get into their tasks quicker by having all of this data in XDR. If we can feed them endpoint telemetry, network telemetry, log data straight out of the box in one place that they can query, that gives them a roadmap to our organization so that they can respond quicker. And that means that's not just useful in terms of getting cleaned up quicker, which I know, the aim of this is always get the attackers out, get technical controls back in place so that we can get back on with our business. But if we can shorten the time to do that, those incident responders can help us with the more business related elements of a breach, right? Who do I speak to in terms of my governance and compliance and regulatory obligations here? How do I communicate this from a brand point of view? How do I deal with internal and supplier communications around this attack? All of these types of things that are kind of lumped onto the IT security team. You'll have to do these when the incident responders are gone. You gain a bit of time, so you gain, you're able to leach some of that experience out of those incident response teams into your business to help you recover from a technical point of view, because that's important, but also from a business point of view to help you to get well quicker effectively. If I look at, again, back at kind of Rapid7 for an example of this, we were seeing Hafnium roll out in 12 of our customers, our managed detection and response customers, over the course of a weekend. We didn't know it was Hafnium at that time. We were just seeing attack indicators emanating from Exchange, so we were kind of pretty sure there was something happening in Exchange that was going on. We were seeing some post-exploit activities, things like PowerShell cradles being downloaded, China Chopper executing commands, things that we'd seen in other attacks, but we didn't know kind of what the 0 day was. But it's just because once the attackers are through that initial exploit, they go back into their kit bag of learned behavior, and they use those tools to kind of try and exploit these organizations. So we went and analyzed these 12 instances. We said, okay, cool. Like, we found them because we had existing techniques from 2019, but actually, there are a few other techniques there are a few other detections that we can build off the back of this to help immunize all of our customers. So we did that over the course of the weekend. We launched about 5 or 6 different detections that allowed all of our IDR customers to be inoculated against this type of attack. But it also, those, by us doing that and kind of building those better defenses for our customers, it also gives us time to look at those customers in more detail, to say, okay, right, come Tuesday morning when Microsoft actually do acknowledge the vulnerability and kind of announce it, we can go back to those customers and say, okay, cool, right, you have got 10 instances of Windows Exchange, sort of Microsoft Exchange running. 5 of them are internet facing, 3 of them have the vulnerability on them that Microsoft has just disclosed. They don't have a patch for it yet. So let's turn up the alerting on those 3 machines. Or if we can do, let's just take them offline until we're at a stage where Microsoft have a solution for that. But it just means, when you do inevitably get with these celebrity threats and celebrity vulnerabilities, business users walking into the security team, your CFO, your CEO saying, hey, I've got a BBC News article that says Exchange is on fire. We use Exchange. What are we doing? You can have a much more grown-up conversation with them. You can say, hey, okay, yeah, we know that we understand the attack. Here's how it's been unfolding in the wild. We understand our risk from the attack. Here's the vulnerability that it's exploiting, and that vulnerability is present on these 3 servers. We've got a plan to get that right, and here's the plan. Here's where we are on that plan. That's a grown-up business conversation that that your CEO or CEO will walk away from saying, okay, cool. The IT security team have their arms around this. They understand where our risk lies, and they've got, they're working on a plan to get us right, get us well. I think we've all done that kind of "don't worry about it, boss, it's going to be okay" type of thing before, and I think that that grown-up conversation around kind of what's happening is a much more confidence-inspiring place to be. If you can do that, if you can link all of these kind of the detection aims together, if you can link that kind of the automated responses and learn from your mistakes and learn from the threats that have been targeted at you, it gets you into better places as an organization. I'm gonna use a rugby team analogy because I'm from the Southwest and that's all that happens in my life, and it's Rugby World Cup, so you're gonna have to listen to me. But these 2 teams, if you know anything about rugby, play rugby in slightly different ways. New Zealand All Blacks are probably more akin to our threat detection practitioners within IT security. They have made a global brand effectively of winning from broken play. They use their defense. Their defense is so aggressive that they are always looking to trip their opponents up so that the ball becomes loose, they have broken play, and then suddenly you have a mismatch of some 15 stone, 6'3" New Zealand All Black running at your tiny nine stone scrum half. And that's how they win games. Now, England win games as well, but they win games in a slightly more structured fashion in that their set plays, their lineouts, and their scrums are the basis for all of their attacks. And they're more akin to kind of the risk management side of our business when we're talking about IT security, right? They win through structure. They make sure that they understand their opposition. They make sure that they understand where their weaknesses are, and they build gameplays to win at those things. Now, I'm going to just point out here that I'm not an Owen Farrell fanboy here. Ryan Lamb, ex Gloucester fly half, is the best fly half of the last 10 years, and he was grossly underused by England. But that's not the point I'm trying to make here. The point I'm trying to make here is, if you can take the best out of both those teams and make it one team instead of competing against each other, where your threat practice talks to your risk practice about the attacks that are being targeted at you, so they are specific and they have the intelligence that they've gleaned from those attacks, and your risk management practice takes that that advice on board and uses it to inform their investments. You can make a lot of the work for the threat team go away by closing the doors and windows that the attackers are using to target you, and you can also make the risk management decisions on where they focus their investments a lot easier, because they are not just blindly reacting to frameworks or threats that are in the news or the latest and greatest thing that's come out of whatever vendor who has happened to release it. They're actively looking at, actually, okay, that's interesting, but it's probably not relevant to us, because last time we sat down with the threat practice guys, they said we were being targeted in this way, not that way. And it makes us as a business be able to kind of prioritize where we invest, but also report back to the business on where we're improving. And that's kind of been sorely missing, I think, over the last few years. And that's really, to give the shameless plug, as Nick would say, That's really where Rapid7 have been focusing their efforts over the last 15 years. Our threat practice has been growing through acquisition in terms of its capabilities. So, we started out as a UBA engine for SIEM platforms. Over time, we've added log ingestion, endpoint telemetry, network telemetry, external threat intelligence to that practice to try and give our customers a complete internal and external view of the threats that are focused at their business. And in risk as well, we are looking to help organizations not just understand where their risk lies, because I think as an industry, we've been doing that for a long time and it just gives people a headache. If I give you a list of vulnerabilities that are 100,000 deep, it's really difficult to understand where you start. If I tell you all of your cloud infrastructure is on fire, okay, great, where do I start? And that's the kind of context that we're trying to give with the risk management stuff, not just giving you vulnerability data, but applying that research to it to say, okay, if I was you, I'd go and patch that server today because it's got something on it. It's internet facing. It's got a vulnerability on it that's available in Metasploit. We know there's malware kits out there that are exploiting it. And last week you were targeted in a similar way. That's the type of information that we're trying to give people to manage their risk, and the that internal and external view that we're trying to give customers for their threats as well. And on that note, I'm going to hand back to Nick because I think I've grossly overrun and
really?
I've probably
I think that might
impacted.
be me. Yeah. I'll just grab the screen back, Ellis, if that's all right.
Yeah, no worries at all.
Thank you. Share very quickly. Thank you, Ellis. I think like the great see my screen.
I can indeed, yeah.
Always do this. I think the great example there is Hafnium and also you say shameless plug here, right? But ultimately, these technologies are great, but they are only great when they are being monitored. When they are being monitored 24/7, 365 by people that are skilled and able to deal with these types of issues and support customers through to the remediation, containment, eradication, recovery, lessons learned, supporting you through those back end processes when something does go wrong in your environment. And this is a shameless plug, as I say. We provide managed services to Rapid7 Technologies from our across our 4 SOCs in Europe. We have over 80 analysts and security related personnel around these technologies, as well as other technologies. We feed Rapid7 Technologies into our service powered by SOAR to speed up triage, investigation, helping us to make informed decisions and response actions quicker. And I think the only thing I'd say beyond that is not only is it important you have it monitored and managed, but it's also really important that you have an incident response plan in place. You have some sort of major incident response call out plan through incident response retainer type services, because when it does get advanced and persistent in an environment, it's when we need to call in those types of experts.
Absolutely. And I think, just to add to that, Nick, we've seen in the marketplace recently insurers mandating that. So like, we won't issue a policy unless you've got 24/7, unless you've got a cyber incident response team that is effective and you've got a cyber incident response plan that's practiced. They want all of the normal log management, MFA type stuff, but they like to call out those process things and people type elements that they haven't previously. Shows us that we should probably be concentrating on them. These guys are, they've taken a beating over the last few years in terms of the premiums that they've issued and the and the payouts that they've had to do. So they're being a bit more diligent around it. And if someone's researching it, they're probably going to have some answers.
Makes sense. Look, I totally agree. I know we're conscious over time, everyone, so thanks for staying on and I appreciate your attendance once again. Key takeaways from Rapid7 Integrity's perspective, we are having success in proving that effective detection and response can be achieved achieved through consolidation without sacrifice, on tight budgets as well. We are having that success. Demonstrations are available in terms of the service and the technology, and we can deliver proof of values around Rapid7 as well into your environment to actually see and feel that value. I think there's there's a couple of questions just came in there as well. So appreciate we're over time. So if anyone is dropping off, but I'll quickly answer these. We currently have an in-house managed EDR, but exploring SIEM options. Would this integrate with Rapid7? Yeah, look, I mean, there's multiple options there. So with regards to EDR, you can bring EDR into Rapid7 for context. At a service level, Integrity provide managed services around both Rapid7 and EDR technologies. So it can also be brought directly into the SOAR platform, essentially, rather than need to send it into Rapid7. So we've got a heuristic view across different technology stacks, essentially. A conversation would be requiring to understand if there's always EDR and Rapid7 is a great combination. We have a lot of success stories in that particular area as well.
Absolutely.
Can XDR compensate for not having a SIEM? I can answer this, Ellis. I don't know if you want to add into it. Go on. Do you want to go?
Done as we do it? Yes, absolutely. Because you've got that log data. The problem we have as an industry is XDR has become a bit of a catch-all term for EDR plus something. And I don't think that's correct. We talked previously about that kind of Gartner SOC triad of log data, endpoint data, and network data. That's kind of the key to making this work. All of the traditional SIEM use cases, compliance, regulatory type dashboards or reporting, you can do that within Rapid7's IDR platform. It's just we're querying the data over the top of that from an attacker point of view as well.
It depends on, I think, to add to that, it really depends on what the XDR technology is or being considered, because, as I say, the branding can be quite confusing, but in certain products and offerings, plus you may have regulatory requirements that drive you to need login, and I say there's certain EDRs that claim to be XDR, but they won't satisfy your compliance and regulation if you have those types of needs within your business. So the good old professional answer of it really depends as well. So look, we are over, and once again, I appreciate everyone's attendance. The details are on there. If you need to get in touch with Ellis or myself, please don't hesitate to reach out with any queries, and we'll get back to you. But if there's nothing more coming in, we will close it here, and I wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Ellis, again. Spot on.
Cheers, Nick. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.